Just to be totally transparent as well, other candidates have mega super PACs that have ads on television.
How are you going to do it? That was basically my question.
So I hope we do it. But here's how I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it by turning into somebody's puppet. I'd rather lose this election than to bow down to, I think, a lot of the special interests that have broken the system.
When you think of American politics and the primary forces that actually drive the governance of this country, you'll begin to see very quickly that it is not actually as it has been told in theory and in the history books. There are very well-connected, very powerful, very wealthy people who have interests that go across party affiliation. We'll get to that in a second. Who have an interest in keeping America in a certain condition. In particular, they have an interest in keeping America broke. They have an interest in keeping the American people uninformed about many issues, both on a sort of social level and on a philosophical level as well. They have an interest in keeping the coffers of certain institutions like the military-industrial complex lined and replete with wealth. They have an interest in also keeping certain things that happen in the country the same to further the status quo, because the status quo largely benefits them. And even if they have an R or a D next to their name, they are still united on those common interests. And this is called the Uniparty, which we understand runs Washington, D.C. and also runs the United States. You don't believe me? Well, I'll just give you a few examples. Both parties voted to send America into Afghanistan, send America into Iraq, and supported those efforts as well uncritically. Both parties supported the war on terrorism. I can keep going on. Both parties continue to support the raising the debt ceiling that sends America towards fiscal catastrophe. I can keep going on. Both parties support maintaining the public education infrastructure that is doing nothing more than corrupting and rotting the minds of children with postmodern ideologies that have nothing to do with education and everything to do with indoctrination. I can keep going on. Both parties wish to maintain the welfare state. I can keep going on. Both parties wish to maintain the entitlement system in America and the culture it brings. I can keep going on. I can keep going on. Now, what I don't do is I don't presume that there is no difference between Republicans and Democrats ideologically. But ideology does not play into what the Uniparty believes. Ideology is actually put to the side. And it is my belief that the Uniparty, this sort of politically organized interests that conspire towards particular common and shared goals that use the aesthetic of politics to mask their differences or mask their similarities, this institution wishes to crush Vivek Ramaswamy in his ascension to possibly becoming the Republican nominee, and even after that, possibly becoming the President of the United States. Now, how do I support this thesis? Very simply, my friends. Whenever you have someone, as I mentioned, who disrupts the common interest of this institution called the Uniparty, the sort of common interests that go beyond ideological lines that unite people of both parties to come in together and maintain them, the Uniparty and its tools and its adherents and its agents will get mad. In fact, they'll get so mad that they will begin to act and react to certain claims that disrupt their power and control out of political outrage and out of moral outrage, rather than out of a sense of rational argumentation that is endemic to how America was formed. America was not necessarily just formed on outrage. Yes, outrage was part and parcel to the founding generation, but our human ability to use reason, to differentiate passion from logic, and then to use logic as a tool to build a morally and philosophically consistent system is actually what made America. Intuition is the beginning of something new. It's the beginning of something beautiful, but it is not the end. If man was bound solely by his intuition, he would not be a man. He would not be a human being. He would be a mere animal. Because animals cannot go beyond their intuition and slip into a place of rationality which elevates their condition. Which is why if we could look at a cat, how a cat was 100 years ago or 2,000 years ago, they're basically the same in the current era. Cats don't build civilizations. Cats don't make airplanes and rockets. Cats eat, they hunt, and they mate, and that's about it. That's what the animal condition is bound to. But man is a higher creature than that, because he has the ability of intellection, the ability to process abstract thoughts, and then to manifest those thoughts upon earth. That's what it means to be a human being, and also that's what it means to be an American. Manifesting correct, morally virtuous ideas upon earth as relates to governance and society. That's what Americanism is all about. if you look at its foundations. And so Vivek Ramaswamy, by talking how he does, by giving the positions he does, disrupts the Uniparty's influence. So for example, let's look at this very closely, and I'll explain how they're retaliating against him in a second. If you look at Vivek Ramaswamy's position plans, and you look at all of what he's saying he wants to do if he becomes president, you will immediately begin to realize, if you accept the premise that the Uniparty have a unified political interests that they will maintain the status quo to ensure exist, you will begin to realize just how much of a threat to them he is. For example, Vivek Ramaswamy has been one of the few candidates who's been vocal about not just reforming, but completely and utterly abolishing the FBI. This is a proposal which has shocked even people like Democratic politicians, and also has made some Republican politicians a little bit upset too, because the consensus, the consensus of the Uniparty for decades has been that the FBI and organizations like the FBI that are under the purview of the executive branch do an indispensable service to ensuring law and order in our society. Remember, it was both the Republicans and the Democrats that in the 1990s signed the crime bill, which further criminalized nonviolent drug use and then emboldened these organizations like the DEA and the FBI to continue doing their nonsense. It gave them more power to continue perpetuating this sort of regime of perpetual victimization upon people who use drugs peacefully. That's what it did. So when you have someone that says, I actually want to get rid of the tool that you used for so many other things, not just drug illegalization, but also for mass surveillance of Americans and also for disrupting peaceful activities that Americans undertook in a voluntary way. Look at COINTELPRO, or also the sort of psychological warfare campaigns that happen against people like Martin Luther King. I want to completely abolish you. The Uniparty says, hold on. We've held up the FBI to be this jewel, to be this example, to be this sort of figurine of all that is good and perfect for law enforcement. And yes, it may have some problems, but even if it has problems, it still is so important because of X, Y, and Z reason. All those contrived reasons, Vivek comes along and says, no, this is un-American, this is not correct, this must go. He becomes a threat to the Uniparty. Oh, let's just continue going on. The global consensus, the global liberal international world order, which has said for decades that the United States has an obligation to maintain economic freedom, so to speak, and enforce that through guns and geopolitical maneuvering. In fact, the liberal international order is one of the primary justifications post-World War II for America's continuous involvement in different parts of the world, exporting democracy and exporting free economy, so to speak, by the barrel of a gun. This is, of course, a foul euphemism for interventionism and imperialism undertaken by political actors who have these agendas that don't conform to the will of the American people, don't further American interests, and also erode, by not furthering American interests, erode the sovereignty of the American nation. But they don't care about that because the global international order must be preserved. This hegemony must be preserved. Oh, well, Vivek comes along and says, hold on, no. I don't think America has an obligation to Ukraine. I don't think America has an obligation even to Taiwan beyond economic interest. I don't even think America has an obligation to Israel. America has an obligation to its own people. Oh my gosh. Nikki Haley comes out and attacks him. You are being bad because Israel is an important ally or whatever. Then, of course, he gets attacked from other people as well, saying that his foreign policy is disastrous and bad. And all these different establishment voices come out and condemn him for stating what should be a morally consistent axiom that every nation is bound first to the national interest and only secondarily to external interest, if at all. In fact, I would argue, being the weird person that I am, that nations have no moral obligation to provide foreign aid or foreign anything to an external force. What we're doing in Ukraine is actually absolutely immoral. Despite the fact that the leftists and those who bow at the call to Ukraine try to make it seem like the pinnacle of morality and generosity to give monies to a regime which has basically destroyed political dissent by banning several opposition parties from its political condition, that is effectively has a leader who has gone around on this sort of name and shame tour, where he told the Germans if they didn't help him, they're like Nazi Germany. And he went to all these different countries and tried to use things from their past to emotionally manipulate them into supporting him. Yeah. If you don't support that kind of person, if you don't support that kind of foul regime, you are evil, you are bad, you are... This sort of twisting of moral thinking, this corruption of moral thinking, is what has led America and led the world into so many bad places. But Vivek Ramaswamy comes along and says, hey, no. America is obligated to its people. The establishment comes out and attacks him. There have been many examples, not just these, many examples of the establishment attacking Vivek for things that are either misrepresentations or things that actually aren't really controversial if you have the proper moral framework in your mind. For example, let's look at the Mike Pence attack. Mike Pence, who is absolutely a teetotaler for the Uniparty, who is absolutely someone during his time in Congress who was in lockstep with the GOP orthodoxy, did not break from it very much at all. You look at any issue that over Mike Pence's career while he was in Congress that he supported, I promise you, a majority or the establishment of the GOP supported that as well. So Mike Pence is who he is. He is an agent of the establishment. He is not anyone who has a sort of independent mind, regardless of what he says about the election thing. Because that was actually, people were whispering in his ear, telling him what to do. That wasn't him standing on conviction and the Constitution as he actually says. Because the Constitution actually says that there is a review process for the elections. But that's a different story, different day. I hate charlatans. I hate chicanery. Let me not say, I don't hate anyone. I'm a Christian. I love it. But I hate trickery. And I hate people who put on this aesthetic of being holier than thou, when in reality, they're the ones selling America down the river, they're the ones actually practicing deceit, and they're the ones who need to be corrected because they threaten the moral foundations of our republic. But Mike Pence comes out and says he's deeply offended, so from point of moral outrage, he's deeply offended by Vivek Ramaswamy's comments on 9/11, which Vivek Ramaswamy basically said that there was an individual who was a Saudi asset, that the FBI and the 9/11 Commission lied about being a Saudi asset, say that he wasn't anything special for years, but in recent declassified documents, we found out he was actually a Saudi asset. And Vivek says, yeah, for that reason, I don't believe the 9/11 Commission told us the truth. Mike Pence, instead of actually being offended that the government concealed a massive part of the 9/11 narrative from the American people, and then used that false pretense to get us into endless wars, which lined the pockets of the military-industrial complex, which lined the pockets of the neoconservative groups that were pushing for this, which lined the pockets of the Atlantic Council and the internationalists who love war, who love seeing people right for productive energies into systemically destructive things like war. And instead of being offended about any of these conglomerate of foul interests, which eroded the American national interest, Pence is more offended that someone had the audacity to question the government. An American questioning the government? How dare he? What a novel idea. An American questioning the official narrative. Now, where have I seen that before? 1776, anyone? Jeffersonianism, anyone? The use of human reason, anyone? Again, Mike Pence's position and his history serves the Uniparty. Comes out and attacks. Desantis. This is one. Ron DeSantis. People thought he was some kind of outsider, some kind of, I'm going to beat woke. Ron DeSantis is a charlatan who came into power off the back of President Trump's endorsement, off the back of MAGA populism, and once he was in power, he decided to focus on superficial issues, some of which had merit, others of which didn't, and he decided to oversell himself as a slayer of wokeness, when in all reality, he misrepresented himself in several cases, especially in the case of Disney, where he claimed to have defeated Disney wokeness, and when in all reality, he didn't actually do that. Disney was actually able to get away with a lot of stuff, despite Ron DeSantis' very, 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 very strong initiative. Then Ron DeSantis tries to become president by running for president, and whenever anyone mentions this, his supporters are so rabid and animalistic, they attack and they get so angry. So Ron DeSantis recently, a memo was leaked from his campaign which said, during the upcoming debate, as opposed to this video, it's so important that he acts as a sledgehammer against Ramaswamy. Forget everyone else. We gotta take down Ramaswamy. Now, this is significant to my thesis because Ron DeSantis quite literally represents the Uniparty's attempt to infiltrate the MAGA movement and infiltrate populism and then bring their own Fox brand of populism into power so they can maintain control over the status quo. Why do I say that? Let's look at his position on Ukraine. Ron DeSantis was asked by Tucker Carlson, what would you do on Ukraine? His campaign wrote a memo saying, Ukraine is not America's business, yada, yada, yada. It would particularly take a position of non-interventionism. But then after he got criticism from conservative media, some conservative media, and a lot of other people, he issues a correction to his statement saying, well, we misspoke. You misspoke on a memo that was written paragraphs long? Really? Did you misspoke, or are your convictions not there? And it says you're being guided by political interest. But also, if you peer back through Ron DeSantis' history in Congress, which no one wants to talk about, Ron DeSantis actually, back a few years ago, voted to send weapons into Ukraine and tried to invoke Ronald Reagan's stance against Soviet Russia to support sending weapons into Ukraine. So DeSantis is actually supportive of the liberal internationalist, imperialist order that has been around and is manifesting itself in support of Ukraine, but he wants to make it seem like he wasn't. But then once his people and once the criticism came in, he just reversed course. Again, an agent of the Uniparty, wittingly or unwittingly, people may say, well, Christian, you're being conspiratorial because they may not know. I don't care if they know or not. If your actions forward the current status quo, whether you are doing it wittingly or not, you are still morally responsible. Ignorance is no excuse for immoral behavior. I can keep going on. Nikki Haley, she wants to, for example, continue that hegemony as well. She has talked about challenging Russia on the global stage, maintaining support for Ukraine, things of that sort. If you are supporting this kind of stuff, you are not working for America's interest. Your foreign policy is not led by moral obligation. It's led by the status quo, and the status quo is killing American national sovereignty. Very simply. I can keep going on and on. They can talk about pardoning Edward Snowden, pardoning Julian Assange. When you have someone who's talking about doing these seismic things, the criticism will flow forth, but it won't be genuine. You'll have people calling you a WEF puppet, even though Vivek won a lawsuit against the World Economic Forum, and he beat that claim. You'll have people, National Review saying at the beginning of the race, National Review, the vanguard of establishmentarian conservatism, the status quo, saying, well, Vivek's not actually running for president, he's running to be famous. You'll have what just came out quite recently, a story saying that Vivek is just running to beat DeSantis, to make DeSantis look bad. He's just a surrogate for Trump. You'll have all kind of things. You'll have people saying that he just wants to increase his podcast profile. You'll have people saying all these salacious things, much of which come from unconfirmed sources that can't be falsified, really, except by those who wrote the story. And if we know anything about the corporate media, they tend to write stories that advance the narrative, that advance the common interest of the Uniparty, that advance the status quo. So can we really trust them in the first place? You have all these different criticisms come towards you to undermine public trust. If he wasn't someone who had the potential to overturn the tables in the temple, to restore the American Republic, the established interest in the media and in the establishments of both parties would not be attacking him so hard. But because Vivek is someone who has both the vision, the foresight, and the insight to destroy the forces that have been tearing America down and to restore a sense of national pride, just by osmosis, he becomes a threat. The Uniparty does not want Donald Trump in there because they understand he's not manageable. You can't dictate things to him. That's why you've seen all these cases, not because they've actually are based on anything real. If they were based on anything real, they would have come out years ago. But because they're based, they come at an opportune time, the summer before he's able to actually be on the ballot to run president, and that disrupts his plans. It's completely and utterly politically calculated. My friends, I'm not saying that any politician is above criticism. Vivek Ramaswamy has positions that I don't agree with. And by the way, I'm Christian Watson. I have my own brand. I have my own show here. I have my own project. This is not the Vivek Ramaswamy channel. So don't mistake my sentiments for just pure sycophancy. It's not that at all. But when I see someone who has a correct understanding of moral foundations, a strong understanding of philosophy, a good analytical mind, and who has been put through the ringer before he's even had the chance to go on the debate stage, before he's even had the chance to go on to the primary season, and there's been so many attempts to tear him down, we should always ask ourselves, why? Philosophy begins in wonder. Why? Because there are political forces that benefit from him not being in the race, and there are political forces that benefit from him not being able to continue. That is why. But we as Americans must reject these political forces and say, we want our country to have a good future. We want our country to not be a land of serfdom under the administrative state, under multinational interests that wish to perpetuate war for their own benefits. We want our country to be this land of individual freedom, this land that is in submission to principles higher than itself, natural law, this land that was founded upon revelations brought forth through objective truth. We want America to be a shining example of that. And that is why, personally, I think that any vigilant voter, whether they're a Ramaswamy supporter or not, should look out for the attacks on him and always ask the question, cui bono, who benefits? And then check the credit of these statements. And I think you'll find, in doing so, that a lot of the statements made, a lot of the claims made, are either easily disproven, or if they're both easily disproven and made with malice of intent to destroy something that could actually help America escape the rut that she's in and she's been in for so many years since the dawning of the progressive era. My friends, stay vigilant. We need a revolution of the mind in this country. We need a return to philosophy, to first principles, to sound thinking, to analysis of our current era. We need a revolution that will bring us closer towards the truth and away from sensationalism. And so I encourage all of you to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. I love you guys so much. If you want to support me, donate to my PayPal, to my Patreon, to my locals, christianwatson.locals.com. Locals helps me a lot. Also, if you are a Vivek 2024 supporter, I encourage you to join the Twitter, now known as X, Vivek 2024 group, which will be in the description down below. It's a place for like-minded people to come into the community, learn more, talk more amongst each other about these issues and many more. And also, comment on this video, leave a like on this video because the algorithm likes that a lot. If you want to support me in my mission, please do all of those things. I love you guys so much, and please, forever and eternally, stay pensive. Bye, guys.